Hello and welcome back to Maths with Mr. Duffield. I am the aforementioned Mr. Duffield, and finally for today I've got a bunch of trig equations involving forms very similar to the other two videos I've already made on this topic, with the exception that instead of just x, this sign has 2x next to it. This cos has 4x next to it. Again, range between 0 and 2 pi means that we're in radians. Let's get going with this first one here. Sine 2x equals negative root 3 over 2. I've taken the liberty of drawing out the diagram already, okay? The sine graph. Notice that there are two repetitions. Well, there's the sine graph repeats, so it goes between 0 and 4 pi instead of 0 and 2. Now I know that the range is between 0 and 2 pi, but also, just bear with me and pay attention to the fact that it's sine of 2x here. That's the clue I'll give you for now. So yes, sine 2x equals negative root 3 over 2. You take inverse sine of both sides of this equation to leave 2x. And the value of 2x is equal to negative pi over 3. That means that if this diagram were to continue down this way, this solution here would be minus pi over 3. That's what has to make sense, right? Because the x value is negative, it's got to be on the left-hand side of this diagram. Okay? Now what that means is, let's jump over to the next point where this path continues. Now this point is a third of pi less than 2 pi. So this point here is 2 pi minus pi over 3. Okay? And similarly over here, this point down here is 4 pi minus pi over 3. Because the pattern repeats. Okay? Now, you would might be aware that this is a symmetrical graph, generally speaking. So this distance here is the same as this distance here, making this value pi plus pi over 3. Because this distance is pi over 3, just as this distance is pi over 3. And then similarly, over here, I might be detecting a bit of a pattern here. This is 3 pi plus pi over 3. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 solutions between 0 and 4 pi for this particular question. Okay, now one of the solutions was negative pi over 3. That falls below 0, so I'm going to discount that. It was useful though in figuring out all of these other points, but for the sake of what I'm doing here, negative values aren't part of the solution set. So pi plus pi over 3, that's 4 pi over 3. 2 pi minus pi over 3, if I think of 2 pi as 6 pi over 3, that makes 5 pi over 3. And then over here, 3 pi plus, 3 pi plus pi over 3. 3 pi over 3, 3 pi is the same as 9 pi over 3. So that'll be 10 pi over 3. And then 4 pi minus pi over 3. I can think of 4 pi as 12 pi over 3. So this will be 11 pi over 3. Okay? So these values that I've effectively just worked out by doing the sums here, in my head, that's true, but doing them, gets me to 2x equals 4 pi over 3, 5 pi over 3, 10 pi over 3, and 11 pi over 3. So if that's 2x, then the values of x are going to be half of all of these. So instead of it being over 3, these values will be over 6, because half of a third is a sixth. You may be understanding why I insisted on drawing double the diagram for this case, because I was finding values for 2x here. Having to half them all means that the the values actually end up becoming between the values of 0 and 2 pi. Okay? So I had to consider more of the diagram, more of this diagram, because I knew that because this was sine 2x, all of these values were going to be halved and would therefore fall within the range of between 0 and 2 pi radians, which all of these do, just about. There's a brief talk to mention to be done to questions like this. Cos 4x equals -1. -1, this means it's nice and straightforward. This is a diagram that I've drawn. Similar thing, it's the cos pattern repeated, this time 4 times, okay? And actually, I don't actually even need to get out my calculator for this. I can immediately see that at the line -1, well, pi is a solution, 3 pi is a solution, 5 pi is a solution, and 7 pi is a solution. Those are, for cos 4x equaling -1, 4x is going to be equal to those 4 values, 3 pi, 5 pi, and 7 pi. Okay, those are the 4 solutions. Now, again, similarly to what we had before, the range of values that the question asks for is between 0 and 2 pi, which all of these do fall within when I express x on its own, dividing everything by 4. Pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. Any fraction above that on this diagram will will have values that are above 2 pi. Okay, so those are my solutions for that particular question too. Straightforward if you graph it, and if you draw the line across from what you're looking for. If it's something as straightforward as 1 or -1, you don't even need the calculator. You just see it and what the solutions are straight from the sketch. Okay? Pretty pretty complex stuff, I suppose, but worth getting to grips with if you want to succeed at this level. I hope that helps you, particularly this question here involving the values of pi. I wish you all the best in all of your future working endeavours, and for goodness sake, get your work done on Teams. I will talk to you very soon, but not before I go to sleep.